That Philly Jawn episode 3. Today I'm joined by Jay Clark and Brian McLernon. Today we're going to start off by talking about the Eagles and which one was more impressive to you guys, the Chiefs win or the Bills win?
I'm going to have to go with the Bills win on this one. They fought through a lot of adversity in that game, had to come back after being down 17-7 at halftime, really struggled in that first half. Jalen Hurts practically took the first half off, but then he bounced back, ending the game with 5 total touchdowns, really putting on an MVP-like second half performance in that game, especially in overtime where he led that game-winning drive at the end. But overall, I liked the way Jalen Hurts was able to play in that second half. And overall, just fighting through those weather conditions, and even with the defensive inconsistencies that we did see, not doing so great on third down, stopping the Bills' offense, we still fought hard, and we still came out with the win.
I'm just going to have to go with the Chiefs win, Brian, on a primetime game in Monday Night Football against the defending Super Bowl champions. I just think that win was much more impressive. And when we look at the records on paper, the Bills are now a mediocre team on paper. We know that obviously you can spew and spin analytics in any way that you want, but the Bills are 6-6 on paper. The Chiefs are 8-3 and are going to be a playoff team. They're going to win their division yet again. So I think that win is just much more impressive. You're going and beating a playoff caliber team, whereas the Bills just aren't a playoff caliber team. I think beating the Chiefs, who's the better team, is much more important.
All right, and then this weekend, obviously a big matchup with the 49ers. What's the key to victory for the Birds?
To me, it's just the guys being out there. I think it's got to be them being healthy and having Lane Johnson out there and playing with a defensive consistency. When we look at this team offensively, when we look at the 49ers defensively, they're a very good defensive team. And they have so many weapons, it's really going to be shutting down Christian McCaffrey for me. And I think that the defense has to step up and keep Brock Purdy in a bit of a mess and not keep him consistent.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go with some of the offensive consistencies here. I mean, we saw some of the play calling issues that Brian Johnson has had all season. I mean, we've been complaining about him a lot as Eagles fans. And just some of the play calls that he has done just really hasn't sit right with some of us, especially me. Like a 3rd and long screen pass with Julio Jones, or some QB runs with Jalen Hurts where he wasn't really fully 100% with the questionable injury with his knee. So some of that play calling really just hasn't sit right with me. And for Brian Johnson, what my biggest thing I have to voice out about him is you got to call a full 60-minute game. It's great that we can bounce back after having tough first halves. We saw that against the Chiefs and the Bills. Not really doing so hot offensively, only putting up 7 points in both first halves. But then coming back in that second half and really answering back, that's great to see. But if you're not calling a full 60-minute game, I don't think us having to answer back in the second half is really going to take us the whole distance to the Super Bowl.
All right, guys, now moving forward, what's your biggest concern with the Eagles as we head towards the playoffs?
To me, it's again, the health of the team. I think that what Brian points out with Brian Johnson being inconsistent, they've been able to overcome that. They're 10-1. And I think that that's the real important part, is that they're winning, and they're not only winning, they're beating good football teams. Last year, the strength of schedule was a cakewalk compared to what it is this year, playing against teams like the Dolphins. The Cowboys are better. You're playing the Chiefs. The Bills are a good team. And your loss came to the Jets, and obviously didn't have Aaron Rodgers, but they still have a very good defense. And I think that the fact that they're 10-1 with some of these injuries, with Lane Johnson going out, with guys not being 100%, the secondary has been banged up week in and week out. I think that is the biggest concern going forward, is having a full, healthy lineup out there on the field.
Yeah, I'm going to partially agree with that, Jake, but I also want to talk about, again, Brian Johnson and some of the offensive inconsistencies, as well as some of the defensive inconsistencies. I'll throw that in there as well. I mean, we're 29th against teams against 30th against them in third down. We're 29th in terms of opponent red zone percentage. We're 29th against the pass. So that does definitely contribute to some of the injuries that we have had. But I just think you can't really be a team in the playoffs that's going to take you all the way to the Super Bowl with something like that. The secondary playing inconsistent, and some of the middle linebackers not really being healthy enough. I mean, we don't know with the status of guys like Zach Cunningham, so hopefully we can bring in like Shaq Leonard. Hopefully he can make a decision soon and not go to the Cowboys and come to the Birds, the good side. But I mean, talking again about the offensive inconsistencies, you just got to call a full 60-minute game, and I just don't think Brian Johnson has done something like that yet.
I just have one more question, Brian.
Go ahead.
What's the record of the Philadelphia Eagles football team?
10-1.
So how are we going to say that play calling is holding them back when they're 10-1 and they have the best record in the NFL? See, the thing that I like to point out is they have so much talent out there on that football field. They're overcoming their own play caller. If obviously it's a concern, but it's not the biggest concern. Can you imagine we're out there without Lane Johnson? Can you imagine we're out there without A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith? Then it's a much bigger concern because you're running those screen passes to guys like Julio Jones, or when Quez Watkins decides to show up back on the field. He got elevated off IR a couple weeks ago. That is more of a concern when you don't have those guys out on the field. Or even worse, what if we're missing people again on the defensive end, which has already been bad and banged up? I just think that the injuries are much, much more of a concern, because if we can't field a healthy lineup, we're going to struggle when it comes and it matters most in the playoffs.
But I mean, when looking at in terms of health, I mean, we saw Carson Wentz and the Eagles make the playoffs with Greg Ward as one of their leading receivers. So pretty much anything can happen with this Eagles team at this point. We'll just kind of have to wait and see and hope our guys stay healthy.
All right, guys, now moving on to the Sixers. They got a big one tonight with the Boston Celtics, another Eastern Conference rival. What do they have to do tonight to beat the Celtics?
Well, Connor, I just think they have to step up defensively against the Boston Celtics. The Celtics have about 5 to 6 different guys that can really beat you and put up 15 to 20 a night. And I think that the Sixers have to work better defensively as a unit, and they need somebody to step up. When we look at the stats versus the Celtics, Tyrese Maxey is the glaring one. In 12 games played against the Celtics in the regular season, he only averages 10.6 points a game. He's got to step up for the Sixers to be able to come out with a W tonight.
Yeah, hopefully they can feed Maxey, especially with the consistent play that he has put up to start this year. And something I also want to point out, I want to see some of the guys from the bench also step up. I mean, you want to see guys like Robert Covington in there. You want to see DeAnthony Melton get some points. We've seen some good games from him this year to start off. Just a bunch of the bench guys really have to step forward, maybe if Joel Embiid or Maxey can't really put up those big numbers like we saw the last time they faced the Celtics. Just a bunch of guys really having to step off, especially coming off the bench, and just keep feeding Maxey. That's really what I want to see. I want to see some of those statistics against the Celtics go up.
All right, guys, Joel Embiid won MVP last year. Do you think there's any way that he gets back-to-back MVPs this year?
I would say no. I think that Joel Embiid, because, like I said before on this show, and I'll say it again, is not a winner. I don't think that Joel Embiid deserves to go back-to-back MVPs when you can't make it to a conference finals. I think that when we look at the list of players that Joel Embiid has played with, he's so dependent on somebody else to help him with the scoring load. Whereas when we look at Nikola Jokic, when Jamal Murray misses time, he's still able to go out and be the guy that wins you a game. I just don't see that with Joel Embiid. I mean, Ben Simmons was good for a while here. We had Jimmy Butler here. James Harden was here. And now Tyrese Maxey. All of these players are all-star caliber players. Some of them might be Hall of Fame caliber players. And Joel Embiid has yet to make a conference finals in his career. So for that reason, you cannot be the most valuable player in the NBA if you can't even propel your team to an Eastern Conference Finals.
I'm going to say he still does have a chance. I mean, we've seen from the statistics standpoint, we've seen how good Joel Embiid has been this year. I mean, he's putting up 33 points per game, 10.2 rebounds per game. He's still playing at a good level. I mean, hopefully he can play enough games to be considered. I mean, we saw the change for the NBA. I don't know exactly how many games you have to play.
65, and he's only played over 65 games in his career twice.
And that's the last 2 seasons, right?
And this year, the way that he's starting, he's already missing a couple games here and there. He already seems to be kind of throwing in the towel, which is a bit concerning. But continue, Brian.
Yeah, I just remember last year we saw Embiid and Nikola Jokic go at it in terms of how good they were playing. We saw elite level of play between both of them, and I think now that we're seeing that again this year, I think Embiid does still have a chance to get that MVP, especially because he won it last year despite Nikola Jokic putting up a lot of good numbers.
Despite Nikola Jokic putting up good numbers and winning the NBA championship. That's the thing that really, when I look back at it, I'm happy that Joel Embiid won the MVP because I was really rooting for him. He's the hometown guy, and I think that last year I don't want to say he deserved to win it, but he was obviously in the race. This year he'll be in the race again, but Jokic won the MVP of the finals last year and won the ring. Joel Embiid has not even gotten close to that point. We're just second-round exits to the Celtics almost every single year. So for that reason, I don't think that you can keep giving this loser the MVP award.
Guys, is this the year we finally see the Sixers and Embiid get to the Eastern Conference and even win it this year?
Well, watching a couple of games, and I hate to be the guy that just is so pessimistic on the Sixers, Connor, but I can't see them making a run and winning the Eastern Conference. I could see them maybe going to the Eastern Conference Finals this year, which would be a big step for this Philadelphia 76ers basketball team. But when we look at the other teams in the East, like the Celtics, who we couldn't beat without Jaylen Brown and Kristaps Porzingis, you look at a team like the Bucks, when Dame and Giannis get that chemistry going, that's going to be scary for the rest of the Eastern Conference. There's still teams that are we have to figure out if they're contenders or pretenders with like the Cavs and a couple other teams in the East.
Orlando Magic.
And the Orlando Magic are at the top of the charts so far in this early season. And I just think that with all of this going around in the mix, there's so many teams that still, and there's so many teams still in the mix, and there's a lot of season left to be played. I just can't make a prediction right now saying that I'm confident that the Sixers will win the East.
In terms of the regular season, I think the Sixers definitely do have a chance to be a top of the Eastern Conference. I mean, I think they can still be a top 4 or 5 team. I think we all agree.
I agree with that. Yes, they will still host a playoff series in the first round. They'll still be a top 4 team. They will. I can't make a prediction right now, especially with the history of just losing in the second round over and over and over and over again. I just can't say that this year is going to be different with the product that they put out on the floor.
Yeah, I'm just hoping that with the culture surrounding this team, I would say it's a little bit improved, especially with the addition of Nick Nurse and the fact that Doc Rivers is gone from this team, and that for once we don't really have any intense drama going around because we had to deal with Ben Simmons for a bit, and then we had to deal for James Harden in the offseason. And I feel like right now with this Sixers team, some of that drama and some of those distractions are kind of pushed away. So hopefully now we have our true eyes on the prize and that our sole focus is getting to that Eastern Conference.
Now we're going to move on to the Flyers here, guys. We've seen them in full swing now. Do we think they're a legit playoff contender?
I would say yes, and I'd say that it's very encouraging to watch this Flyers team, especially with how young they are, be competing like this. And I think that it's very encouraging because they were playing a bad brand of hockey last year. Right now, they're 18th in the league, and if the playoffs started today, they would have a high chance for a wild card spot, which is very, very encouraging. Do I think that they can make a deep run in the playoffs? No. Do I think that they could make the playoffs? Absolutely, and I think that that's really, really encouraging for this Flyers organization.
Yeah, I'm going to agree, Jake. I mean, they have a bunch of guys really stepping up, both veterans and young players. I mean, you have Cam Atkinson, Travis Konechny, both playing pretty well. I mean, we saw Atkinson returning after missing a full season. He's got 23 games played so far, 8 goals on the year. And they all have a bunch of young stars, too. I mean, Owen Tippett being one of them, Joel Farabee as well. They have a bunch of promising young and old players on the roster. I mean, Carter Hart obviously doing well. I mean, he did get hurt earlier in the season, but he was able to come back, and he's still playing at a pretty good level. So overall, I'm definitely very encouraged with this Flyers team, and I think that's something that feels a little refreshing to say after not really being a playoff contender within the past few years.
What is your guys' biggest concern this year with the Flyers team that we've seen so far?
I'd probably have to go with the defense here. I mean, we have guys like Travis Sanheim who can get the job done. I mean, he's got 42 saves, most for a defensive player, 2 goals, 14 assists along with that. But we don't really have anyone else that I think the Flyers can truly rely on. I mean, it's tough to say because they are winning games, and usually if you outscore your opponents, you are the winner in that game. So, I mean, it's tough to say, but I just don't think there are a lot of playmakers that are really threatening to some of the more top teams in the NHL.
I think the biggest concern with this Flyers team, the thing that where I'm going to have to disagree with you is because you knew going into this season the defense was going to be bad. If you were that worried about it, you would have addressed it in the offseason. They didn't. You knew the defense wasn't going to be good. The concerning thing is how bad they are on the power play. They have, I'm just going to take a look at this right here, 11.7% conversion rate on the power play, which puts them 25th in the NHL. That is not good for a team that's supposed to be very, very good on offense, and you're relying on your offense to score all the time to keep them in these games. And I just think that that's the most concerning thing is when you're down towards the bottom end in power play rank, when you're up a man on the ice, you can't find the back of the net. That's a bit concerning, especially when it comes to playoff time.
I mean, we saw them last night score two power play goals, I believe, correct?
The one was a 5-on-3, though. So, I mean, like, you're up 2 men. You have to be able to score. It's just the ranking, 11.7%, 25th in the NHL. That is not good for a team that's trying to compete and kind of skate around into the playoffs. And that's just not going to get it done to be a playoff caliber team. And I think that's the biggest concern for this Philadelphia Flyers team.
What's one thing that you're encouraged about so far from this season?
Well, the one thing that I'm encouraged about is how young these Philadelphia Flyers are and how they go out every single night and they play. And I mean, they're young, and I think the thing that's great is they're young and they're competing. They're winning games, so this could be where optimistically we look 2 to 3 years down the line, some of these guys stay, they build a core, they build a competing team, they add pieces, and then you get some of the guys that they drafted this year into the mix a couple years down the line. I think that is the most encouraging thing is they're young and they're competing for a playoff spot, which is really, really good, not only for this year but years to come.
And what I like to see is that this Flyers team, they come ready to play. I mean, I was reading an article from The Athletic. Bless The Athletic, by the way. I was reading an article from them, and they come ready to play. For the most part, they stay in their games. I mean, obviously, we've seen their offense shut down in some games this year. I mean, that's going to happen. It's kind of unrealistic to say that you're going to be scoring 3 to 5 goals every night, right? So, I mean, but they're coming out, and for the most part, they bounce back, and that's what I like to see. They're a fighting team. I mean, Philadelphia lives and breathes for their fighting teams. Hell, we call the Phillies the fighting Phils, for crying out loud. So this is a team that truly fights, and I love to see that both from their young and their older players.
I just think, Brian, that we're kind of saying the same thing here because I think that this Flyers team, they're young and they're exciting, and I think that that's something that you really like to see. They go out every night and they compete. They're not worried about the money like some of the older players are. Their bodies aren't as fatigued because they're younger. They're just kids having fun playing hockey, and I think that that's the great thing that I like to see. And to quote former Eagles defensive coordinator Jonathan Gannon, they've simply just got fire in their gut. I think that's a great thing to see.
So not much is happening right now live with the Phillies, but today some news dropped that Juan Soto is going to the trade deadline, and the Phillies are going to be heavy contenders for him. How do you guys feel about that?
I don't have the stats in front of me, but I would not love it, to be quite honest with you. I think that Juan Soto is not a great defender out in the outfield, and I think that his bat had a down year when it comes to the eye test, and I just believe that is not what the Phillies need right now, especially he's on a shorter deal, so you're basically renting him for a year or two, and I think that the Phillies just don't need to pay all that money for somebody that's a liability in left field. We saw it with Kyle Schwarber. I'm not comparing Juan Soto to Kyle Schwarber, but he's closer to Kyle Schwarber than he is to a guy like Pache or Marsh when it comes to defense. And the bat's a little bit better, but it hasn't been that much better, in my opinion, when it comes to the eye test, Brian. So for me, I would be not heavily opposed, but still opposed to it.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you, Jake. I mean, I just don't think Juan Soto has a true fit on this team. I just don't think he really matches with what we're trying to go for. I don't think he really fits out in the outfield for what we're trying to do. I mean, we're trying to move. We have Kyle Schwarber in left field sometimes. We have other guys that are trying to get rotational time with Rojas and Marsh coming in. We're trying to really focus on the defensive outfielders, get those guys out there making plays. And I just don't think Juan Soto is really fit for that. As you said, Jake, he's a liability out there in left field, and I just don't think we truly need another bat like him in our lineup. I'd much rather go for a guy like Cody Bellinger or something like that, or address our pitching than rather address someone in the outfield like Juan Soto.
Well, and it's a hefty paycheck. He's getting paid a lot of money, and he is young, and he's very good. But again, I don't think he has a place on this team, especially with the way that they played in the playoffs. I still really like Johan Rojas in center field and moving Marsh to left. I think that Towards the end of the regular season, Johan Rojas was hitting around the 300 mark. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I think he was at like 296.
He was hitting around there, and then when it came to the playoffs, you're playing the best of the best. He wasn't great, but I think that with more experience, he will get much, much better, and he exceeded my expectations towards the latter part of that regular season. I don't think that there's any need to come in and try and replace him with a guy like Juan Soto, who didn't have a great year last year. So for me, I would say no.
Well, that's all the time we have for today on That Philly Jawn, Episode 3. I'm Connor Warrington, joined by Jay Clark and Brian McLernon, and that's it.